report of their investigation into the use of Thompson and Clark by government departments and agencies. Wednesday is the final sitting day for the year. There will be question time and the traditional end of season speeches from each party, which I'm looking forward to participating in. You've got your end of year function, but I don't need to tell you that. On Thursday, I have a series of meetings in Wellington before flying to Auckland in the afternoon, and on Friday I have a final round of radio interviews before making a visit to Auckland City Mission, which is something I try and do on a semi-regular basis. I want to start today's press conference by announcing the new Chief Justice. It is my pleasure to announce that Her Honour Helen Winkelmann has been appointed the new Chief Justice of New Zealand and a Judge of the Supreme Court of New Zealand, and will take office on 13 March 2019. The consultation process highlighted the enormous esteem Justice Winkelmann is held in by the legal community. There was a high degree of consensus from all quarters for her appointment. Her honour is recognised by her peers and the profession for her superior intellect, her judicial instinct and experience, coupled with strong leadership, qualities I'm sure will make for an outstanding Chief Justice. Justice Winkelmann was appointed to the High Court in 2004 and held office as the Chief High Court Judge from 2010 until her appointment to the Court of Appeal in 2015. On behalf of the government, congratulations to Her Honour Helen Winkelmann. I wish her all the best for the next stage of her career. I just want to make a few comments on the process. This is the first appointment of a Chief Justice as head of the Supreme Court. There is no statutory process for the appointment. Accordingly, I asked the Solicitor General to lead a process in order to provide advice as to suitable candidates according to agreed criteria. The criteria were developed by the Solicitor General for my approval, modelled on the criteria for appointment of the Lord Chief Justice of the United Kingdom. The Solicitor General consulted Dame Shan, retired senior court judges, the New Zealand Law Society, the New Zealand Bar Association and the Māori Law Society. That consultation was to determine who was thought to meet the criteria for Chief Justice. The Solicitor General then formed a panel comprising Dame Sylvia Cartwright, retired High Court Judge and former Governor General, and Sir Terence Arnold, retired Supreme Court Judge. That panel considered the consultation feedback. The Solicitor General then provided me with the advice to enable me to make this final decision. I have also, I should add, we took soundings from the Shadow Attorney General, and before making this announcement, I have also informed the Leader of the Opposition. I want to pay tribute today to the excellent service Dame Shan has given as Chief Justice. Dame Shan has led the bench of the new Supreme Court and embedded that court into our legal culture, following the establishment of New Zealand's own Supreme Court as the Court of Final Appeal in 2004. Dame Shan has also played a significant role in the development of our laws and constitution and has represented New Zealand superbly on the international stage. There will be time early next year for the government to thank Dame Shan properly for her dedicated service, but I did want to acknowledge her formally today. Now, if I may, we have an additional update that I'd like to share. So I'd now like to invite the Minister of Agriculture and Biosecurity, Damien O'Connor, the Chair of Dairy New Zealand, Jim van der Poel, and the Chair of Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Andrew Morrison, to the stage, who are our Mycoplasma Bovis response partners. Now, we gave an undertaking at the time that we made the decision to work towards eradication of M. bovis that we would give an update on our progress before the end of the year. So it's in the interest of that we are before you today. We have also received feedback from our group of international and New Zealand experts, the Technical Advisory Group, or TAG, convened to provide independent advice on our M. bovis eradication program. Today, we can announce that the TAG have reported that substantial progress has been made towards M. bovis eradication, and that they are more optimistic that eradication is feasible than they were 6 months ago. There are several reasons for this, and the Minister of Agriculture will go into more detail, but in short, it's clear that our current approach to eradicate is the right one. The Technical Advisory Group reports that the analysis of genetics shows we are dealing with a relatively recent and single incursion that arrived in New Zealand in late 2015, early 2016. This confirms we made the right decision to eradicate, and this report is an endorsement that we are on track. We have 32 active infected properties, and 51 properties have been depopulated, cleaned, and had their restrictions removed. They are getting back to business. Before I hand over to our partners who we've worked closely on this response with, I want to acknowledge that it has been an incredibly stressful time for those farmers caught up in the outbreak, which I believe has been in the order of roughly 1,000, several of whom I have met with over the past year and who have shared their stories with me. The Welfare and Recovery team has increased in size by 1/3 since the recovery package was announced in October to 36 really hard-working and dedicated people. The Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb New Zealand Compensation Assistance Team has helped 180 farmers who have come under different types of regulatory controls as we track down and the spread of this disease, and I thank them for their work as well. This is a time to thank all 350 people working on this response, our farmers, their communities, industry groups like Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb, but also the Rural Support Trust, Rural Women New Zealand, Federated Farmers and others who have all contributed to our world first attempt to eradicate Mycoplasma bovis. I believe collectively we made the right call and backed up that decision with action, and the evidence is pointing towards it being the right decision to make. I'll now hand over to Minister O'Connor to provide more details of the Technical Advisory Group's findings.
Well, kia ora, and look, firstly thank you to the Prime Minister, and I have to acknowledge, I guess, the brave call that was made by my Cabinet colleagues when we, as a government, in conjunction with industry partners, and I'd like to acknowledge Jim van der Poel from Dairy NZ and Andrew Morrison from Beef and Lamb, when we committed to a program of eradication. Nowhere else in the world has this been tried, and so we hope that we had all the early planning correct. And I have to say that the Technical Advisory Group that have met, they've come from around the world, spent a week talking with MPI, with farmers and people involved. They've produced a draft report which is currently being worked through with MPI, and that, as the Prime Minister said, endorsed the fact that it is technically feasible to eradicate and substantial progress has been made. And I would too like to acknowledge the huge commitment from MPI staff, from farmers, from the people who have been doing the testing. 250,000 tests have been conducted on samples throughout this country, something that's never been done before. The report, as I say, confirms the hypothesis that this is a single strain of Mycoplasma bovis, and that the transportation or transfer of this is from animal to animal, and so therefore the progress that they acknowledge has been made in NAIT will enable us to better track any animal movements into the future. They have identified the reality that there will be other infected herds identified as we identify calves that might have been out prior to the upgrading of NAIT, and they come back into the dairy herds. So we expect to find more infected herds over time. We'll have to continue testing 5 years beyond 2020, when we think that we should have a very good indication that we're on top of this. So this is an ongoing program, and we, so far, endorsed by the Technical Advisory Group, we believe we're on track. And so I would like to acknowledge the commitment of both Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb, and I'd maybe like to now hand over to both Jim and to Andrew to make a few comments on their position regarding this plan to eradicate M. bovis. Jim.
Thank you, Minister. I guess probably first just worth starting and saying that all the evidence is telling us, and Prime Minister and Minister have really set it out, but all the evidence is telling us that eradication was the right decision for our farmers and for the economy. This is a good example of what can be achieved if we all work together in a collaborative approach that we've had with government. I want to just acknowledge the Prime Minister and the Minister and Beef and Lamb and really working together, and I think it really shows what we can achieve when we work together for something like this. This is something quite unique, and I think the strength of where this is tracking is a reflection of that. I particularly want to acknowledge the 1,000 farmers who have been affected, whether they've been under surveillance or whether restriction or the diseases have actually been found on their farm. Their road has been a real hard one, and I think all of us have shared some of their stories along the way. We're working closely with those affected farmers on the ground, and any farmer can call our recovery team for support at any time, and we continue to work with them going forward. We know there's been challenges with compensation, but we're working with MPI to actually resolve those and making good progress, we think. It's worth noting that how we fund our share of the portion of this is dairy is going to pay 30%. As you know, government is paying, through the taxpayers, paying 68%, and dairy is paying 30%. And we'll be consulting with our farmers early in the new year as to how their share of this will be paid, and we'll be looking to put in place a biosecurity levy to do that. But as we go forward from here, our priority is to support our farmers and looking ahead and trying to make sure we don't get another outbreak going forward. And I think the last point I'd just like to make, I think it's really important that we continue to support and drive NAIT. Without NAIT hasn't been perfect, but without that we wouldn't have been able to achieve this. And it's really important that farmers really make sure that they follow the NAIT and we implement the recommendations that are done, and that going forward, I think that's going to be a really important part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister and Mr O'Connor and Jim. It's nice to be standing shoulder to shoulder here when we've never attempted something like this before, and to be standing here with partners like government and Dairy NZ and getting the feedback from the latest TAG report. It's nice to stand here shoulder to shoulder. Firstly, I want to pay credit to all the farmers in the rural communities who have really stepped up to the plate in this eradication program. As I say, this is a first, and so this is a space we haven't played in before. We know this has been a difficult and uncertain and often upsetting time for farmers and their families, especially those directly affected, because people's livelihoods are at stake. And as we're making the decision to eradicate this, it was always the human cost we had to factor into this as well. The report from the Technical Advisory Group is certainly encouraging for both the beef and the dairy sector as we go through this. Although it's still early days and this is a complex disease, it does demonstrate we made the right decision to try and eradicate M. bovis. It also illustrates the value of collaborative process, as Jim just said, working with government and dairy industry together. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Dairy NZ, the government, MPI, and especially the Rural Support Trust, because it's that human element that is, we get numbers here with TAG reports and things. The human element is huge in this process. So I'd just like to acknowledge and thank the Rural Support Trust. Our view was we only have eradication on the table once. And if we didn't have a crack at this, that option would have been lost. So I'm very proud that all departments have taken that option. As Jim said, Beef and Lamb New Zealand and Dairy New Zealand will be holding a joint consultation with both dairy and beef farmers in the new year, looking at how we will collect this biosecurity levy. We're anticipating we'll collect it at slaughter, and the conversation is how quickly we want to repay this down. And so we will be encouraging that our farmers contribute to this as the costs fall, so that we contribute as the program is developed. We'll always look for ways to continue to improve our support and resources for farmers during the M. bovis response. And our other hope is that with a united effort we can overcome this challenge and emerge even stronger. And straight away we'll be working with government and Dairy NZ to take the learnings from this exercise so that we don't go through this again, or we can learn what we can from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy to take questions on M. bovis first of all.
When Jacoban submitted its electorally a couple of weeks ago, he said it's unlikely that ETR will be inclined to source the infection. Is that good?
I think the Technical Advisory Group referred to that as a reality we may have to deal with. Their view was that we're better to focus on the eradication and continue on that path. While investigation will still be underway, we accept that we don't want to put a huge amount of resource into an exercise that may not deliver, when in fact we can put that resource into eradication and that will deliver.
Is it difficult though to work on eradication when you don't know where it came from, when you can't extend the source of it?
No, it's not difficult. What it does is heighten the awareness of possible pathways, and to ensure that we don't bring any risk material, or that the pathways through which another strain of M. bovis might come shut down, and that we do everything possible at the border.
And so we won't know if M. bovis has been eradicated until 2025, is that right?
Yes, what the technical advisory group have said, that we'll have to keep monitoring, so that where there might be an odd animal that hasn't been traced through the NAIT system, they might have been at a farm at the end of a valley, that when they come into either to slaughter or into the dairy herd, then they can be picked up, and their advice is that we're going to have to continue to monitor.
Has this new assessment changed the government's view on the total costs in the long run?
No, not at this stage. We've paid out around $34 million in compensation to date. We haven't revised our expectations at this stage around the potential total cost, but of course these things continue to evolve.
You do mention in 2019 one of your goals will be improving the speed of payment to farmers in terms of that
Yes.
compensation. When can you say all farmers will be paid out by? Will it be mid next year, end of next year?
And we have managed to speed up at least a significant portion of the payments. Minister will be able to give you an update on the timeline around that, but what we've started to do is to try and make sure the bulk of payments were coming through, and then where there's additional form filling that might be a little bit more technical and difficult, that then follows on.
And look, we've taken the opportunity to review the whole process on a number of occasions through the year. The new Director General of Agriculture has come in, and he's taken the opportunity to have a look over the whole system. Again, we hope to pay out another $7 million before Christmas to farmers. So there's still applications in the pipeline, but the system is getting a lot better all the time.
The MPI work on trying to pay out 80% of payments within a few working days.
Minister, you initially estimated 150,000 cows to be slaughtered. Can you just give us an update on the number slaughtered so far, the number killed, and how many?
I think it's about
50,000.
About 50,000. That might be at the top end, but I have to say that so far, we've been moving ahead of that, and the total number may not be at that level, but it's likely to approach 100,000.
Do all members of the technical advisory group now believe that eradication is possible?
I believe that, while not being privy to the discussion, the report certainly confirms that. And in the meeting I had with them, they were all much more positive about what we had done and about the likelihood of eradication.
Because of course there were a range of views at the time that we made the decision.
How did it feel when you did get that milk testing back, knowing that you had kind of gone out on a limb to do something that nobody else had done, and then getting those results back?
Well, we've been getting updates, and I have to say it's been very positive. I've had my fingers crossed, and the fact the 3 farms that we identified as being infected were previously known. So that confirmed the validity of the testing, and we've worked right through now with a few farms. We've basically tested all, at the exception of a few farms, we've tested all the farms in New Zealand.
You're right though, we undertook together to do something that no one else attempted to do before, and so to then have 70,000 tests undertaken and to come back and have the technical advisory group say you're on track is a good feeling. It's not over, but we feel that we've made the right decision.
You've had a massive uptake in terms of farmers signing up to the NAIT program.
Yes.
Would you put that down to greater enforcement, given you've got 50 new enforcement officers?
And awareness.
Or would you say it's just greater awareness because of this excursion?
I think there was one infringement notice prior to us coming into government. There have been many of them now. I think the message has got out there very, very clearly. Get on, do the right thing, adhere to NAIT, and we'll all be able to help one another.
Do you want to make a comment on NAIT at all?
Yeah, I think it's. I think what Mycoplasma bovis has done is made people really aware about how important NAIT is. I think before this, people knew about it, but it was kind of a nice to have, and they probably weren't as vigilant about it. But I think maybe the fact that more people being prosecuted or infringement notice being sent out has helped. But I think you'll find in the farmer base there's a lot more awareness now about how important it is.
Do you expect there to potentially still be the odd cowboy farmer, as you described Minister O'Connor right at the beginning of all this?
There's always
Jim
going to
has
be
a view.
there's always I do have a view. There's always going to be a few people who are who come along kicking and screaming. But I think as an industry and as a collective group, we actually we're really pushing hard to make sure that everybody meets the standards they're supposed to.
And are most farmers on board now in terms of eradication?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, because the alternative would have been far worse for all of them, and I think they really understand that.
Other questions? All right. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, other questions?
In this human trafficking case in the Hawke's Bay, the government promised to take serious action on migrant exploitation. What are you going to do to prevent this sort of thing happening?
Yeah, and of course, you know, we have said that we do want to make this a top priority. First of all, we have no tolerance for this kind of business practice. Not only, of course, does it put individuals in a terrible situation themselves, but it also undercuts those who are operating legitimately. And so there's multiple reasons why we need to take up enforcement. MBR taking enforcement action in this case, and we have said that we want to increase the amount of enforcement that we're doing in this area generally.
How was this missed for several decades, and do we need to now take urgent action to increase the number of labour inspectorates?
Well, as I say, we are increasing, looking to increase enforcement. My understanding is there is an increase in the number of joint compliance operations that both Immigration New Zealand are undertaking alongside the Labour Inspectorate. Ultimately, I can't answer how this was missed. It may simply be that there wasn't enough work done to look.
And one of the problems is that if people come forward, they'll be concerned that they'll be sent home. How can people come forward without jeopardising their own immigration status?
Obviously, that is something that both the Labour Inspectorate and Immigration New Zealand are aware of, and they give assurances that when those cases come forward, that they'll be dealing with those individuals in the safest way possible to ensure their safety.
You said that it might be a case that there was not enough work done to look.
I can't. Ultimately, though, I can't answer that question. I haven't been briefed on what's happened in this case. I don't know whether others came forward. Or whether or not inspectorate work was done, so I can't answer that appropriately.
Would it be helpful if there was a guarantee for these workers coming forward that deportation action would not be taken, that their information would not be passed to immigration?
They can raise issues anonymously. You could contact, for instance, Crime Stoppers to raise issues. But ultimately, we are reliant, and obviously we can undertake our own enforcement. But of course, we do place some provision out there for people to be able to come forward anonymously as well.
With regard to Mr. Peters' speech in Washington on the Pacific Reset, did you see that speech before he gave it, and did you approve it?
I wouldn't expect to see every single speech that a minister gives. That would be, I think, an unreasonable amount of an unreasonable expectation on ministers. There are, as you'll know by advisories, a huge number of speeches that are given any given week.
Does that speech then accurately represent government policy on both China and the Pacific?
Which particular elements are you referring to?
Well, where he singles out, or where he calls on the United States to get more involved in the Pacific.
Look, we've been doing that publicly for some time.
And he also says the Pacific is at an inflection point.
Look, and that's a conversation that's been had in the public domain for a long time. That's no secret. The discussion around different countries' foreign policies and whether or not that's meant that we've had less engagement in the region is a matter of public debate and commentary. Of course, it's not only of the US that we believe there'll be an interest in different regions, including the Pacific. Of course, France has an interest. The UK may take a different approach to foreign policy post-Brexit. These are conversations that I think are worth having with those who we've shared in the past similar values and directions when it comes to foreign policy.
So is there room in the Pacific for China?
Look, this is not a bidding war. This is all about making sure that where there are shared values and projects, that we partner with those who are able to deliver in the best interests of our region.
But does this speech indicate your government is moving closer to America,
No.
a little bit further away from China?
Absolutely not, no.
Have you had any
As I say, there's a number of people I've had conversations around the Pacific generally, President Macron, Prime Minister May. You'll find that most nations are outwardly focused, are interested in different regions across the world, and frequently will have conversations with New Zealand as a member of the Pacific region around areas of partnership and development.
Have you had an update on China on whether that trip will go ahead after it was
No,
postponed?
but nor would I expect to. We often do have a bit of back and forth on dates.
Have you made a decision on the UN compact, and when can we, is it today or tomorrow?
I think the signing of that, the ratification, is I believe roughly the 19th. Obviously that's something that's finalised by ultimately Minister Lees Galloway and Minister Peters, has been discussed by Cabinet, but I'll be leaving it to those ministers to make the final announcement.
Can I ask a couple of questions about the Nathan Kratzkau case and the hit and run over the weekend that's been referred to Crown Law? What's your response to this?
Yeah, my understanding from reports that I've seen is that there is a chance that Crown Law will appeal that case, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment beyond that.
Mark Mitchell has called for other MPs from all across political parties to join him tomorrow and accept a petition. Will somebody from Labor be there?
Look, I haven't checked in whether or not that that's a request that's gone to our Labor MPs. Again, from Minister's perspective, we do need to act cautiously. We should intervene in cases where Crown Law, for instance, are still considering their options around appeal.
You previously said America's decision to move its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem was not helpful for the peace process. What do you make of Australia's announcement over the weekend?
We maintain the exact same position that we always have, that we've always advocated for a two-state solution, and that any discussion around positioning of embassies ultimately are for those individual countries, but we didn't see that as furthering the peace process towards a two-state solution.
Is it unhelpful then for Australia to recognise West Jerusalem as Israel's capital?
It's a decision for them.
Is it an unhelpful one though?
It's a decision for them. We've got our position, they've got theirs.
Have you had any briefings on the problems around the census in the last couple of months?
I have had some updates around the origins stemming back to when decisions were made. Obviously, the decision to go towards a mostly digital 2018 census was made in 2014. So obviously a decision made some time ago and was well bedded in by the time that we took office. What I've also been advised though was that there was an expectation on Statistics New Zealand to reduce costs by the last government by 5% over 2 full census cycles. And that was at the same time that Statistics New Zealand did some risk analysis and advised that they would need an increase in support over a 5-year period in order to do their job properly. And so I think we can surmise from that they were expected, not only in the face of increasing costs, to cut costs by the last government. So I do find it pretty rich to have the opposition now try and place blame when ultimately they were making funding decisions that have had a pretty big impact on the census.
Was that decision to go digital first kind of? Was that the wrong decision in your view?
Look, I think the decision to go digital obviously needed to be well supported by the funding to roll it out properly. And obviously concerns were raised by Statistics New Zealand. And not only did they not have that responded to, they were asked to make cuts.
Are you worried about integrity of the next budget?
No, look, I think at this stage we do need to let statistics do their job. They've said they want till April in order to work through some of the issues that have come up, and work through the data sets that they have to be able to respond to the range of different areas in which we use census data. So I want to allow them the space to do that till April.
Does that mean it'll be released in April?
They've undertaken to update us in April, is my understanding at this stage.
What do you say to people that say that the justice system is too focused on offenders rather than victims, and that there's a softening of sentences?
I would say we of course need to be victim focused, of course. And we do need to make sure that our justice system meets several tests, and one of which of course is to provide the opportunity for victims to see justice be done, and it's one of the elements of has been one of the elements of the work that Andrea Little is doing.
Do you think there's a division? Do you think there's a division between the sentencing the justice system dishes out and public expectations?
We've always had to meet those competing demands, but victims, of course, over the years there has been a focus on trying to place them at the centre. Victims' impact statements have been part of that, restorative justice processes. And of course we need to make sure that we're still serving our victims in our justice system. Okay.